pubic piercings, pros, cons, advantages, disadvantages. Also going to talk about what you should know before getting one, procedure, actually getting a pierced, healing, living with a piercing, and what happens if you, jewelry, and what happens if you decide, hey, I don't want this anymore. Please take it out. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 51. So you should stick around. For those who are new here at the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel, welcome to the channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding them useful. But you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located inside Skin Kitchen in the fabulous city of Des Moines. Now, the piercing we're going to talk about today is named after its location. It is a pubic piercing. It is a male genital piercing. So, as a disclaimer, if you are easily offended when people talk about said things, not of a proper age to maybe be watching this, or generally do not want to learn about this particular piercing, I would suggest finding another video. There are plenty on this channel that are PG or sometimes G that is going to be a little bit more along the lines of what you're looking for. Now, also, if you're looking for some type of stimulus sexually, this is not the video for you. The whole purpose of this video is educating those that are considering getting this piercing done as kind of a precursor to getting one. Now, with that all said, let's talk about what the piercing is and where it's located and etc. This is a piercing done where the shaft meets the pelvic mound, usually done traditionally with a ring. It can be done with a curved barbell or surface-to-surface barbell. The idea around this is its location will somehow stimulate female partners. Whether or not that's true, location, anatomy, it's one of those things. And we'll get into that. This is a surface-to-surface piercing for the most part. Like most genital piercings, including scrotums, frenums, etc., they tend to heal a little bit better in the genital area than they do on other parts of the body. But it is a surface-to-surface piercing. You should know that going in. This was developed, I believe, because there's not really any documentation on this one, in the 70s and 80s, probably in the gay BDSM subculture, where most male genital piercings were developed and came about. And then it was done professionally and began part of the whole piercing movement probably in the late 80s or mid to late 80s, and is kind of a rare piercing. It's not a common one. It kind of goes through favors, and every once in a while I get asked to do one. Now let's get into why you came here, the pros, the advantages, things that make you go, yeah, this needs to be in my life, or yeah, this needs to be in my partner's life. Starting with number one, it is said that the placement of this particular piercing can stimulate the clitoris. Now, let's do a little bit of comparison anatomy and think about where that's located and how vastly different that is from female to female, and then try to position a piercing on a male that's going to match that. Really, I don't know if this works. I've had clients that claim it does, but most of them were like, I didn't really notice any difference. The thing you always have to take into account when it comes to genital piercings is it's exciting at first, and then that excitement kind of fades. Sometimes it's stimulation, sometimes it's stimulating your partner, or it's just the thought of having it pierced. It has really mixed results is what I'm getting at. Number two, kind of already alluded to this, it is a rare piercing. It is not a common piercing. It's not one that you're going to see very often encounter. Number three, does not affect walking and other activities because of the location and because it's on the top, opposed to like a scrotum piercing or a gish piercing or even a frenum piercing. It's not going to have as much contact with clothing, bicycle seats, etc. So it doesn't go anywhere near where the thighs come together. So it's not going to interrupt a lot of activities like other male genital piercings may do. Number four, another activity it doesn't really interrupt is intercourse because of the location. It's not on the shaft of the penis. It's not going to come in contact with or be as uncomfortable as, like, say, a Frenum would be, or even a Prince Albert at first. This piercing is kind of isolating away from the place. It does take a little bit extra care to make sure that it doesn't become contaminated, just basically because of its location and where, condoms end. And number 5, the last one, easy to conceal. Like old genital piercings, this is a piercing you can have that no one other than people you tell, people you show to, in intimate partners would need to know that you have it. If you live in a conservative part of the world, or you are in a conservative job or career or what have you, you can explore the wonderful world of body modification and piercings without everybody and their brother knowing it, unlike getting an eyebrow piercing or, a lip piercing. It's a little more subtle, it's a little bit more, and it's a lot easier to hide. Now we've come to the part where we remind you to do stuff. If you like this, please like this. We like it when you like it. Share with other people, because sharing is caring. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you're notified every single time we post something. And if you have something to add or you have a question, please leave a comment. Now it's time for the cons, the disadvantages, the things that say to you, not mine, not something I want involved in my life. I think I'm going to move away from this one in that direction. Starting with number 1, this piercing is prone to migration and rejection. As I mentioned earlier, it is basically a surface-to-surface piercing. It is not uncommon for these to move or completely reject from the body over a long period of time. Can they heal? Do they have a better success rate than other surface-to-surface piercings? Yes, but they still are prone to it. Number 2, STDs. You are more acceptable to STDs even after the piercing is healed. So whenever you're switching partners, you need to practice safe sex, which means latex barrier, until you've both been tested. Number 3, does not stimulate the actual person wearing the piercing at all, pretty much. This is a cosmetic or aesthetic kind of piercing. Yeah, it might stimulate your partner. We're going to get to that. But the reality is it really doesn't do much for the person that has it. So it's not like a Prince Albert or even a Frenum or a Gish, where there might be some stimulation that you gain from getting the piercing and healing it out. Number 4, the bleeding. Yeah, this piercing can bleed anywhere from 3 to 5 days. You have to take precautions during that time period to avoid staining clothing. It can kind of be a pain in the ass. You're basically dealing with bleeding for a couple days. And the last one, number 5, it may not stimulate your partner at all. Really, when it comes down to this type of piercing where we're trying to get it where it's positioned, where it's going to magically stimulate your partner, it's really difficult to do. The reason being is there's a vast difference in female anatomy. There's a vast difference in male anatomy. Not quite as much. But to try to position this where it's perfectly going to come in contact every single time is kind of a flip of the coin. Before we move on to things you should think about before getting it done, check out our merch store. A link is in the description. Lots of t-shirts, lots of stickers, fanny packs, all kinds of fun stuff. Link is in the description. Now we're going to move on to things you should look for, things you should consider before getting it done. Your piercer should be experienced with this piercing. Verify this. This is a rare piercing that not many people do or have done. So it's really important that you have somebody that has a little bit of experience with it, especially when it comes to placement and the proper jewelry for your anatomy. Your piercer should be professional, informative, and make you feel comfortable. Keep in mind, this is someone you're going to disrobe in front of. If they're creepy and weird or childish or just generally you just don't feel comfortable around them clothed, you're really going to feel uncomfortable around them if you are unclothed. The piercer should evaluate your anatomy during the consultation. They should also give a consultation that covers things like risk, aftercare, commitment, jewelry, everything that's going to be involved with getting this piercing and having it, or healing it and then having it. They should discuss with you pretty openly and volunteer a lot of information and be there and be happy to answer any questions or concerns that you may have. This piercing is usually done with a ring, curved barbell, or a surface bar. The thing with this is a little bit has to do with how pronounced the area, how loose the issue or the area is, and what's going to work best. When this forms, it'll form a flesh loop around it, kind of like a frenum does, a scrotum, or a gish. It does this with the rings, with the curved barbells. Of course, a surface bar is going to be a little bit different, and that's going to have its own little problems, issues, and etc. You're going to need a disrobe in front of your piercer, so wear clothing that's easy to remove. Don't wear, 20-hole Doc Marten boots that you have to unlace, and skin-tight leather pants, and, locking underwear. Wear something that's easy for you to remove and easy to put back on. Something that's comfortable, light sweatpants are great. Shorts are great, that sort of thing. Maybe with a pair of shoes you can slip off and on very easily. Lastly, it's a good idea to contact your piercer in advance and find out whether or not they supply aftercare product or sell it. If they don't, you need to figure out exactly where you need to purchase that. We suggest on all piercings using a sterile saline spray, such as Nelmed's Piercing Aftercare. You can use a wound wash version and some of the other brands, but basically, it's a good idea to make sure that you can get that easily, and if you get it in advance, even better. Have it on hand and not have to worry about it. You can just hang out in the house for the rest of the day. Now let's move on to the piercing experience itself. First off, there is a consultation. They will examine your anatomy and try to determine what size jewelry is going to work best and what placement is going to work best, or if they really don't feel like you're a good candidate. Jewelry selection is next. Like I said, personally, I like the curved barbells. Surface bars, the problem with surface bars is they're pretty much in there until the piercing comes out. They just can be very difficult to change. And in some cases, people will end up losing the piercing if they try to. Plus, the long-term goal of this for most people is to have a ring in there that knocks around and does various fun things for their partner. So a curvature ring, curved barbell, or even a ring is probably the two most common that I've used over the years. I've had good and bad success with either or. I have tried surface bars, really didn't notice much of a difference, to be honest with you. Next, you're going to sign a waiver. This is going to cover a lot of important stuff, and it's important that you do read the waiver, especially if you have any type of pre-existing medical conditions or in any type of medication, etc., or allergic to things. It's a good idea to always read the waiver as you go through it, just to be on the safe side. Now, that waiver will list like health issues, medical issues, intoxication, allergies, pre-existing, I already did that, medication. So it's going to cover a pretty broad range of things that may or may not impede you getting pierced that day. Be honest. Next, the area is disinfected. Usually we do a pretty broad disinfection of the area with a surgical scrub. The piercing is then marked. If you are going to be wearing a ring in this piercing, or that's your long-term goal, you probably need to mention that before the jewelry selection, and definitely remind them when they're marking it to have a good fit. We don't want to go so deep that you have to wear like an inch ring there, because it's going to be very uncomfortable. Once the piercing is marked, this can be done freehand. Personally, I like using forceps because it really is easy to remove that loose tissue as much as possible and isolate it and support it during the piercing. The needle is injected in and through. If they're using threaded jewelry, they'll probably use a guide pin. If they're using a ring, it will be pretty much blunt force against the back of the needle and then pushed. The needle's pushed out with the jewelry. And then they close it up, stop any primary bleeding that may be happening, hand you a mirror and go, look at this, and you're done. Now, there might be some throbbing and aching. Usually with genital piercing, it's like an, ow, God, that hurts, and then it's over. That pubic, right where the pubic mound kind of begins and the genitalia area ends, sometimes you will have a little bit of throbbing and aching afterwards, especially with like the Christine, kind of the same effect that Christina can have from time to time. Of course, piercing will be tender to the touch. You'll see redness, discolorization, maybe some slight bleeding off and on. One final thing I should need to talk about when it comes to placement on this. There are some people that will do them vertically. That is possible. However, it was my experience when we experimented with it a few times on a client years ago that the vertical version seemed to migrate even faster and have more contact and more likelihood to catch on things. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your placement and you're in desire. Now let's move on to healing. Average healing time in this is anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks or longer. Clean twice daily using a sterile saline solution. You must practice cross-contamination prevention. That's going to involve washing your hands before you handle it. No oral contact or exchanging of bodily fluids on, near, around the piercing for a minimum of 6 months. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have sex for 6 months. That just means you need to use some type of latex barrier. When switching partners, even after the piercing is healed, you do want to practice safe sex until you've both been cleared. Keep your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with it needs to be cleaned on a regular basis. Do not submerge piercing in bodies of water you cannot control the quality of, which is everything but your unclean bathtub. In other words, while this piercing is healing, I don't advise swimming at all. Keep pets away from it. Don't let them sleep in the bed with you. Our main concern is they're going to contaminate your sheets. We don't think you're going to do something weird and odd and unconsensual. Icky. We just want you to keep the pet away from things that may come in contact with the piercing, which is an open wound, which may cause an infection. Sexual activity when it feels comfortable. If there is pain or discomfort involved, please stop, rest, or try an entirely different position or method or whatever you're doing that doesn't cause the discomfort and contact. Just like with any piercing, the more you mess with it, the longer the healing is going to be, the more uncomfortable it's going to be, the more prone it is to have problems. So don't test it. Just kind of take it easy for a little while. Avoid clothing that may catch on the jewelry. Avoid sharp ends and etc. for the same reason. I don't know exactly what you would wear, but you want to be cautious when removing tight underwear and etc. You just avoid things that are going to get caught on it. As I mentioned a couple times already, there's going to be some slight bleeding anywhere from 3 to 5 days. This may require wearing a sanitary napkin or gauze in the area. You're also going to see some redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness of the touch. These are all products of the trauma that the piercing itself produced that will fade in time. Then it'll get to a point where if you bump it just right or you move the jewelry wrong, it's going to hurt. That moves on to jewelry. If the jewelry was pierced with a curved barbell, there might have been a little bit of extra length allowed for swelling and etc. You want to downsize if it's catching on things very quickly. Just as soon as you start having issues with it during that 4 to 6 week area, I would really suggest downsizing. Otherwise, if the piercing is tight or the jewelry's tight fitting, there's really no reason to change it. It should be a little loose because we tend as humans to expand and contract, but for the most part, there's no reason to change it unless you'd like to. You want to wait until it's healed to change it, and I would suggest the first year or so that you have it professionally changed. Common sizes with this is going to be 12 gauge or thicker. 12 gauge tends to be a little bit thicker. It gives a little bit of more anchoring and a little less possibility of rejection, more tearing through that soft tissue. Diameter-wise, anywhere from 3/8 of an inch to 9/16, maybe a little bit longer, varies from person to person. Of course, if you have a service bar, it's going to be the thickness it is, and usually some of them are flat. And that's pretty much what you're stuck with. Now, curved barbells or service bars might be your best option, even if you're a piercer of a ring. In some cases, removing the amount of movement those rings have and had during the healing process and cause a little bit of rejection or migration can also, switching out to a curved barbell can sometimes slow that down. It's not a 100% solution. Usually going to a surface barbell after being pierced that way isn't going to work well, mainly because they're just not going to sit in there correctly. However, into the game, circular jewelry, something that's kind of flopping around in there, seems to produce the best stimulation for your partner, I guess, if it even works at all. Now let's talk about living with the piercing. Jewelry should be left in at all times, only removing to replace. Piercings are notorious for closing if you leave the jewelry out for a long period of time. Now, you're going to get a raised flesh loop. That's kind of talked about this earlier. Frenums do the same thing. So do scrotum piercings and gishes and haftas and all that stuff. This is normal. Usually it's not meaning that it's rejecting or anything else. It's just the way that piercing heals. Avoid excessive trauma and pressure on the piercing. If it hurts to do something, don't do it. It's that simple. Now, clean the jewelry in the shower with warm water and soap is more than enough to maintain the jewelry and the piercing after it's healed. If you have clothing that catches on this jewelry all the time, avoid wearing it. Just use some common sense. Also, anything that puts pressure on the area. I could go into various different sex toys that are going to be very uncomfortable, but I don't really think that's important. Just use some common sense. If you're putting something made of leather around that area and then tightening it, it's going to cause damage to that piercing. Basically, if it hurts, don't do it. If you have threaded jewelry, check the ends on a regular basis. I usually suggest doing it weekly. Pick out a day of the week, Monday or Tuesday, whatever. That is check your ends day and make sure those are on there tight. They tend to fall off at the worst possible time, and in a situation where even if you could recover the jewelry, you're not really going to want to put it back in your body, like down the toilet or rolling down the hallway at work, that kind of thing. Lastly, if there are any signs of rejection or migration, it's usually best to remove the jewelry to avoid further scarring. So if you feel like it's rejecting or you're having other issues, see your piercer. Have them take a look at it as soon as possible and determine whether or not the piercing is rejecting and needs to be removed, or if things are doing okay. It just had, a bad day. Lastly, let's move on to abandoning the piercing. If there's a situation where you're just like, I'm done with this, and you just want to remove the jewelry, if it's during the healing period and there are any signs of infection or other problem, consult your piercer or a doctor before removing the jewelry. The reason for this is if it is an infection and it's deep inside that piercing, is how your body heals infections. Your body heals infections by isolating infected tissue and fluids and then slowly pushing it out of the body, usually through the wound, while replacing with healthy tissue below. If you take that jewelry out during the healing process, there is always a possibility that the two holes will seal at first, possibly trapping that infected tissue and fluids inside your body, which will cause your body to have to produce an abscess or cyst, which means you're going to need medical attention. So if there's any signs of problems, consult your doctor or piercer before removing the jewelry. If the piercing's healthy, there's no signs of problems, and when I say problems, rejection is not the type of problem I'm talking about. If there's no signs of infection, no signs of problems, removing the jewelry either during the healing process or afterwards is not going to be an issue. You just want to keep an eye on it if it's still healing. Just like you would any other wound on your body. Practice cross-contamination prevention, clean the area, monitor it, just like if you had a puncture or a cut on any other part of your body. If it's healed, it'll probably squeeze up in the center first and then slowly fill outward. It may appear open for a long period of time. When you pinch the area, you'll be able to fill that tube, but the reality is the piercing is closed. It is not open. It's just scar tissue. That scar tissue is still there. Sometimes these will produce kind of a white, chalky, waxy discharge, kind of like cream cheese, called sebum. It is normal. It is natural. Your body produces it on purpose. It's not a sign of infection, no matter how bad it smells. Well, that's all I have to say about that today on pubic piercings. If you have this piercing or you're thinking about getting it done, I hope this was helpful. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Thank you for watching, and enjoy one of these other videos. Might learn something, too.